What a life. Oh, we're live. Awesome. Yes. I should not
Hey,
clap the mic, but I'm very happy that we are finally live on this stream. Hello. Are all things good on your end?
yeah, I can see you and hear
Yes.
you. Good.
Good, good. So how are you today?
I am doing well. How have you been on this Sunday, other than the tech issues?
Besides the tech issues, life is going great for me. But the tech issues are, life gives you speed bumps sometimes, and then you continue on with the rest of your life. So it was simply a speed bump. And now here we are on an entirely different link, and maybe people will come find us. But either way, we're going to have a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we always have a wonderful conversation. So,
Yes. All right. Well, then let's just get into it. I will first I want to talk about why this came up. So basically what happened was I was online and you have different Facebook groups, and especially when you're a coach, you have different groups of people that you're just trying to see what people are chatting about, and also for your own personal connections with different groups of people. And I kept seeing things like when someone would show their engagement ring and say things like, he chose right, he chose me, he chose right, and I said this to one of my friends. I was like, oh, that's a terrible way in putting it. And she's like, why? And I was like, well, it's as if the woman has no power in the way she is proceeding in life, and that she has no power in choosing who she's going to be with. It's not saying that it's not nice that he chose her, but she's disregarding the fact that she chose him. That, oh, look, this is also nice that I found him or I chose him. And on that same note, there's so much talk about Lori Harvey. If you don't know who Lori Harvey is, she's Steve Harvey's daughter. I don't know a ton about her, to be honest, except her dating life, because it's on everyone's mind what she's doing with her life, typical woman issues. And she basically is dating so many high profile men, and it's almost like, wow, good job, girl. But as usual, which I really hate, which is something I definitely want to touch on today, there's so many women who are talking about her and how they talk about her negatively, like, oh, she can't keep a man. And why aren't they choosing her? She doesn't know how to keep a man. And these different terms that I'm always like, y'all act like she has no choice. They always take away the choice and the power from the woman. And so I wanted to talk to Keshia about this because I know she has great advice when it comes to dating. And also just on first, let's start with your concept of decentering men, because I love this, because it seems as if we throw away our all of our power as a woman sometimes. So let me know what your thoughts are on starting with the decentering of men.
yeah. So, one of my issues with dating coaches in general is just this whole idea that um, a lot of the advice is how to get a man. And just my personal experience with this, my personal experience dating. Also, my dad is a minister. He and my mom used to counsel other couples. All of that emphasis on doing all of these things to get someone ends up with you not being the real you. And then you see all these relationships where people, they fall in love with someone's representative. And then when the real person comes out, then like the relationship doesn't go very well, right?
Mhm.
So it's not that we don't care what a man thinks, but if you are a heterosexual woman, you care about what the right man thinks about you. And for you to find that right man, you really have to focus on what it is that you need, what you want, what will make you happy, what your boundaries, what your standards are. And then coming from that, then once you center yourself and you find someone who's aligned with you, then of course the two of you both care about what each other think. But when you make it all about how to get a man, you end up setting yourself up for failure.
Absolutely. It's kind of like when you are so focused, and I mean, especially when you first enter the job market, it's a similar situation. You're so focused on how do I get the job? How do I get the job? How to get the job? And you forget to ever think about the fact that you're going to have to be the one there with that job later. In the same way, you're going to be the one participating in life with that man, assuming you're trying to go for something long term. And if you're saying things like this, it's usually what you're shooting for. It's just so, it always baffles me so much to just think about, you're completely throwing away all your power, all your opinion, and basically just the fact that you're human and you're just chasing. You want to not seem desperate, but by saying you can't keep a man actually makes you kind of desperate, because it means that they might leave you, and that you never have a choice.
Right, and it's funny because, like, I'm looking it up now. Um, when we talk about Lori Harvey, and I find that this is one of the same things that I saw with Taylor Swift a few years ago, because a lot of Taylor Swift's music is her talking about past relationships.
Mhm.
And you see people talk about, like, oh, they've been with all these men. They're passed around, they're for the streets,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And you look at it like, I'm looking up Lori Harvey's dating history. Okay, so she's with Damson Idris right now. Uh
Mhm.
Last year she ended her relationship with Michael B. Jordan.
Oh my
Um
god, she had a boyfriend a year ago, and then was she had the nerve to think that she could date again? The
yeah, so
audacity.
2016 she was with some Dutch soccer player. They ended their relationship in 2018, and she was linked with race car driver Lewis Hamilton and then Trey Songz after that. So you're talking about between 2018 and 2020 when she started dating Michael B. Jordan, two men. Like, it's not uncommon for a woman in her 20s to be in relationships that last a year, 2 years, and then to leave those relationships and be in another relationship that lasts a year, 2 years. Like, if we
Exactly.
were looking at any woman who was not a celebrity, nobody would bat an eye at this.
Exactly, and the amount of men who have a different woman with them every single award show, every single day. First of all, half the people aren't even there like, "Oh, who's that girl? Okay, now we don't care anymore." But if a girl goes on a date within, I don't know, a year, to goes on a date with another man, a lot of it, of course, is jealousy, and a lot of it is also like women just judging other women so aggressively. And can you talk on that? Why do women, I mean, I have my views, but I would love to hear your views. Why do women have that this point of view when they're speaking on women, other women often?
Because there's so much about, in our society, what a good girl does and what a good girl doesn't do. And there are so many women who play into that. They're told good girls, for example, wait until marriage to have sex. You know, good girls put up with trash behavior. Like, think about the sound that's trending on TikTok. He's a good man, Savannah. You know, the origin of that sound is talking about a husband who's abusive, but he's a
Mhm.
good man because he pays bills.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these things about, like, what a woman is supposed to do, what a woman is supposed to put up with. And then when you have a woman who has the audacity to think for herself, to be herself, to figure out what works for her, and then she also has the audacity to be happy. You see women who are in situations where they've been told to do things that don't work for them. They do it anyways, and they're unhappy. So, yeah, it's jealousy. It is also, I think a lot of times women, they get told to be a certain way, to act a certain way, and because of that, they feel trapped.
Mhm.
And so it's a bit of lashing out at their own imprisonment, that they put themselves in.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but because they don't know the way out, they can't figure the way out. They hate on women who have figured out a way that works for them.
Mhm. It's the projecting and reflections kind of thing in this situation too, in the way you're talking about. You have women who have worked to uphold some image, so that other people feel a certain way about them, even though they are not happy with the person that they have become. And they can't admit to that because then that would make them look weak from their point of view. That would make them look like they have no power, that they don't have this value that everyone else has been giving them. And so when they see such a thing, they're like, who are you to think that you can walk in who you are? And who are you to be able to have the audacity to, I don't know, date multiple men? Super smart as well. She also makes them all sign NDAs. So, to be honest, she becomes more valuable this way because nobody's business is being shared. This is actually a significantly better person to date. And these guys, yes, they could have any other woman. So, there is a reason they are choosing to be with her. And in order for the system to change, we also have to change in the way that we are treating each other. We have to also be supportive of other women making decisions on their own and not just exist. You need to allow other women to make decisions on their own, even if they're not the way that you would approach things. Because the point isn't for us to all think the same. The point is that we should all be able to think in the way that we want to.
Yeah, but you also have to question the programming too,
Mhm.
because I see this so often. But by the time a woman finds me, she has been following plenty of other dating coaches online, and including a lot of male dating coaches.
Mhm.
And a lot of the messages that some of them send about things like if a woman's above a certain age, she's over the hill, she's hit the wall. Um, a woman who has children is less desirable, all these different things. And so they're hearing these things, they're like, okay, well, this is what I have to follow. But then they don't look at the actual world around them. Like off the top of my
Mhm.
head, I can think of 2 or 3 friends I have that were single mothers and met their husbands, like, after they already had kids. I can
Yep.
think of women who've gotten married in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Even I can think of one woman who just got married and she's in her early 60s. Um, so you're hearing all these messages and you're thinking, okay, this is what must be done in order to find my happily ever after. But if you really took a step back and looked at reality, reality is not reflecting that.
Yeah. You have to be careful with who you're getting your advice from, right?
Yeah.
Like I myself have also listened to these YouTube dating coaches before, or at least look them up. And you definitely have to question everything. I mean, you should anyways. Even if I tell someone something, I'm like, question me too. Like you need to question everything also so you can check your own understanding of what you're believing and whatnot. But look at where the person is coming from and think about what their motive is. Is their motive to get you into a relationship or just get you a guy and then come back? And so you have to keep listening to them over and over again. What is their actual motive? And are they only pandering to the people who just want a quick answer that makes them feel validated for their thought process? Or are they actually trying to get you to the place where you're going to get the thing that you want?
Yeah. Also, like, and I'm quoting a Bible verse, but I just want to say that in college I studied religion, and I can tell you that all the major religions have something that echoes this sentiment.
Mhm.
But there is a verse that says that, like, a tree by its fruit.
Mm. Mm.
And when we think about who we're taking advice from, I always believe that no matter who the person is, there's something valuable that I can learn from them. But
Mhm.
I also know better than to take advice from certain people in certain areas. Like a lot of these, I'll just say his name. Like, I'm not going to tiptoe around it. Kevin Samuels. Before he passed away, he was twice divorced and single. Um, and he, when he passed, he was with a woman who may or may not, there may have been money exchanged for him to like spend the night with. So when we look at that, it's like, this is the man that you're getting advice from on how to, like, be in a happy, healthy relationship. Someone who had to be shamed into, like, paying child support. He was way behind on child support, and it wasn't until that became public and people started putting peer pressure on him that he actually paid that up. This is
Yeah.
the advice you're taking from on relationships. Not saying that you couldn't take advice from him on branding. Great at that.
Mhm. Clearly he did. Maybe marketing is his forte.
Right. Right. But dating and relationships, like, to me, the math ain't mathing on that. And
Mm-mm.
you see a lot of these, and I'm not trying to slam just men because, like, I see a lot of like femininity coaches talking about
Ooh,
like
ooh.
soft life and hypergamy and all of that, and all well and good. But I also see that a lot of these women are perpetually single,
Mhm.
but they're talking about like how to get a man. And if your aspiration is date men, use them, use them for money, whatever, be a city girl and all that, okay. But like, why are you following someone for advice and like your goal is to be married
Yeah.
and you're following someone who has never been married, shows no signs of like getting close to it,
Mhm.
like
Yeah. Like, what are they offering to show you in any way possible that they have this knowledge, right? You don't have to be 20 steps ahead of the person you're helping, but you gotta be, like, at least 1.
yeah.
Like, if you're seeking someone to be your coach or whatever, they have to be at least 1 step in front of you. They don't have to be 20 steps in front of you, but, like, they need to know something a little bit more than you do or have experienced something that can assist you in the thing that you are needing assistance with.
Yeah, no, I said this to a client of mine, and it was funny because later on I mentioned to her a podcast episode that I thought would be really helpful. And she came back to me and she was like, "It was helpful, but I'm surprised that you mentioned this woman because she's not married." And I was like, yes. But one of the things that I like about her is that she had been in a series of, first of all, she had been in a series of, serious relationships that had lasted years and all that. So she had a lot of experience. In the podcast episode itself was talking about like how to recover from heartbreak. And it was like, she does understand this concept.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I wouldn't recommend some other things that she said, but on this, she is on point. And I think that that is something that there is that balance. When you
Mhm.
take advice from someone, maybe there are certain things they can't help you with. Like, I mean, in her case, I wouldn't tell my clients to follow any advice from her on how to get married. Not that she gives it, but she's never
Yeah.
been married.
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but at the same time, she has valuable things to say about
Mhm.
recovering from heartbreak.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you can still give advice on communication even if you haven't been married because 2 humans are communicating. You need to still know how to communicate. But it
Right.
doesn't mean I'm going to go give you all the advice on how to communicate with your husband. No, I can tell you how to communicate more clearly, but you have to contextually add those 2 together. But I wanted to go over some of the other things you had told me about your views on this keeping a man situation. Could you talk a bit, or you talked about this, but I also love talking about this, the mistake women make when they are auditioning to be a girlfriend instead of discerning who they are dealing with?
That is a mistake. It's the auditioning. When let's just take this out of romantic relationships.
Mhm.
Like, you and I met, I like you. Now, like,
Mhm.
how did we come to that conclusion that like we like each other? We talked, we had a conversation, we found things that we had in common. And there was no, oh my goodness, like I need Michelle to be like my best friend. And if she's not, like the world is going to be over with, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's
And
how most people feel, but yeah.
but like this is the problem with dating, is that all relationships are related and they form the same way. So when women go on dates, it should be, you need to be present in the moment and you need to understand, I am trying to discern if this person is aligned with me and what I'm doing and how I want to live life, and can we have a
Mhm.
partnership together. But when women go in auditioning, asking, "Oh, I need to do these things. I need to say things this way. I need to act this certain way. I can't order this food off the menu because I look terrible eating it." You know,
Mhm.
doing all of these things, first of all, they present a version of them that may not be the real them. And second, if you're not present, your discernment is off. So this man could be from the very first date telling you all these things that are like, this is a red flag, this is a red flag, or this is not something that works with me and where I'm going in life. And you're not paying attention to those things because you're so busy focused on, I hope he likes me.
Yeah. It's the perspective. It's the choose me thing. I need you to choose me, choose me, choose me. He chose me. Look, he chose me. But then it's not you that they chose. And even if you still have to make some choosing, you have to choose in that situation, right? If you go on a first date and you're dating a guy, he sees this other version of you that is just made to please him, but not, it's not you. So eventually you's going to show up. Like the
Right.
reality is you are you, and you can't be an actress all day and all night. Eventually, you're going to boil over and you are going to show up. They're going to be confused because they're going to be like, who is this? I've never met this person. You're upset now because you're like, you don't love me like this. They've never met you.
Yeah.
They only met the other person that shows up, your representative. They've never met you.
Yeah.
So,
And then this whole idea of like keeping someone too. First of all, you can't keep a person who doesn't want to be kept.
mm,
There are people who are cheaters, men and women. And if you're dealing with someone who is just a cheater, can't be tied down, won't be tied down, not good at commitment, all of that, there's nothing that you can do. You
mhm.
know, um,
You
back to
can't
that whole
force
idea
them.
of like, what was that?
And so you can't force them.
Right. Like I hear people say like if he wanted to, he would, and like to some extent.
That's such an
But
interesting thing. Yeah, go on with that because
yeah,
I love this one too. 'Cause I wanted to, we would.
to some extent. Okay, so yes, I have seen situations in which a man wants to be in a serious relationship and he's ready to settle down and all that. So, like, he gets rid of his player ways, right? He changes and all of that. And yes, being with the right woman can help with that. But there is also a matter of a person has to reach a certain level of maturity. They have to reach a level where they're okay with confronting themselves and why they develop certain bad behaviors. So even if the man wants you and he
Mhm,
really wants to be in a relationship with you, like that's half the battle. But then he also has to love himself enough to be able to confront his issues, to confront his patterns. He has
mhm,
to be at a level of maturity where he can accept, okay, I need to do some work on myself. And if you don't have both those things in place, you know, and obviously the more important part is that he's willing to work on himself. So if you don't have that in place where he's willing to do that work on himself, he's fed up enough with himself that he's willing to make some changes, and then he also loves you, then you have somebody who, yes, if he wanted to, he would.
yeah,
But it doesn't matter, like, if you have a man who wants to be with a woman but he's not willing to confront those things in himself, it doesn't matter how much he cares about the woman.
yeah, exactly. Actually, I have 2 things on that. One, I recently had someone ask me, like, what I was looking for in a man and all these things, and one of the main things I just said was like, "Yeah, he had to have at least started working on himself." And then he's like, "Okay, well, what does that mean?" And like different things. I was like, "Well, you can clearly see it. If you've been working on yourself, if you're wanting to see it, like if you are allowing yourself to see the person as who they are and not who you're making them to be when we're in our like honeymoon or when we just meet them, if you pay attention, you can usually see very clearly if someone is working on themselves. So if we wanted to, we would in the same way you're saying, yeah, if they're ready for it, then they're ready for it. But if they're not ready for it, yes, maybe sometimes they might get past it and try, but then you're going to still have more issues later on. And it was almost like I was being demanding by saying this. And I was like, doesn't make sense for me to let go of everything I've done for myself. And I know that there are men who work on themselves. So I'm not pessimistic. I just don't see the point in giving time to the wrong person. But back to the if he wanted to, he would. A lot of people say this, and this isn't exactly on the same, but the statement. But people don't communicate either. They'll say if he wanted to, he would. And maybe he is wooding in
Yes.
his version. Maybe he is doing what he thinks he should be doing. We have such perspective things that I even had to learn like, okay, Michelle, but look at the actual situation. Is he doing a possibility of the version of the thing that you're expecting? Could you clearly explain it to him what you were looking for and then see if he is wanting to be a part of that thing you're asking for? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say a great example of this, um, and I think you and I have briefly touched upon this in a different conversation, talking about love languages.
Hmm.
So, you know, my husband is very romantic when it comes to like he will buy gifts, he will say nice things, all of that. Um, it just so happens that my love language is acts of service, right? So, you know, when you have that type of mismatch, because people often give love in the way that they themselves want to receive love.
Absolutely. It's
So
so funny.
so he and I have both had to have these conversations with each other where he has said to me like, I see you're doing these things for me. I see, I'm cleaning up and like trying to organize things for him and like make his little space like more tidy and stuff like that. And he's like, what I would really love for you to do right now is like just get on the couch and cuddle with me. Like, that's not
Yeah.
how I want your love. I don't want you organizing stuff for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is
You
funny
know,
that we give the same one even though we know that it's not necessarily the case.
yeah. So for him, like I have had to say that to him sometimes, like, I see like you want to give me like a back rub and all that, and like on another day and time that would be appreciated because he loves physical touch. And like on another day that would be appreciated. But right now, what I would really love for you to do is, I can't take a nap because I keep thinking about the dishes in the sink. So if you could do that while I take a nap, that would like really.
That's real love right there, 'cause I don't know if I would get up to wash dishes for someone.
But you're right, like, there's this balance. One, you have to see that a person is trying to show you love. They are putting forth effort. And then sometimes you recognize that, like, okay, I see your effort, I acknowledge your effort, and I appreciate it, but it would make me feel more loved if you could do these things.
Mhm.
And that's the difference between seeing that someone is making an effort and understanding that it may not translate the way that you would, as opposed to being with someone who's putting forth no effort and trying to force them.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the other topic that we originally on, because I want your opinions on a few of these things. What would your view be on talking about? I find it funny that there is the idea of pick me's and being chosen, because essentially, like, being chosen is supposed to be good and being a pick me is bad, but you are pick me until you were chosen, correct?
Right, right,
So,
right.
so it's like the pick me finally got picked and
Yes.
chosen. So what is your view on this? I do have a point of view on pick me's for sure. But I find them all to be of the same bunch, actually.
Yeah, so the idea of being a pick me is back to what we talked about decentering men. You really have to let go of this idea of like wanting to be picked by men, doing things for the male gaze. Um, this is like a discussion that my husband and I have like all the time because like I remember I don't wear a lot of makeup very often, but every once in a while I do. And I remember one time we were going out somewhere and like, I'd done like a full face of makeup and everything. And he was like, why would you do that? I don't really like when you're covered in makeup like that. And I was like, oh, sweetie, I love you so much, but this is not for you. This is for like the girls who are gonna see me. Like, what I mean?
Oh, I
Like,
get
this
it.
is for pictures that I know I'm gonna take and I'm gonna be posting on like Instagram or Facebook. And
Yeah,
like, I want my friends to be like, she did that. Like, this is not for you at all. Like,
yeah, yeah. The amount of things that we do for other women.
right. But it's, not to say, oh, I'm never going to try to look good for my husband or I'm never going to do something that he appreciates. But when you make your life, like when you focus on what men will think, how men will interpret certain things, like my brother-in-law hates when women wear the color red because he's very conservative and old fashioned. And, there's this
Oh,
whole idea of like women wearing red being like
right.
slutty. Let's,
Yeah.
let's just say that out. I'm
Yeah.
like, if I'm around him and I have on a red dress or a red sweater, I'm not changing clothes because he thinks like that women like
You're a
that's something
heathen.
that like women of the night wear. Like whatever. He can
Yeah.
have he's entitled to his opinions and I respect them, but I don't live by them either.
Mhm.
And I happen to really like the color red. So I mean, I'm glad that he's with my sister, but obviously, like I could never be with a man who like felt that way,
I look good in red. You're married, sir.
right?
Sounds like a
Right.
you
But like that's the point. It's not that like that makes me a bad person or that makes him a terrible person, but a characteristic like that would not be a fit for me. So I would
Mhm.
never live my life trying to be a fit for someone who
Who
felt
is
that way.
not for you, yeah.
Right. So when you're a pick me, that is the problem, doing all of these things to make all these different men happy. And honestly, one, you end up making no man happy because
Absolutely.
you're just tossed ashore, just
Yeah.
changing yourself constantly. And men respect a woman who knows what she wants. Men in general will respect you when you know what you want. And then those men will respectfully opt in or opt out, you know?
I mean, they have choices too. Like I said, it's not a matter of they can't choose you. It's a matter of you throwing away the fact that you should be choosing who you're going to be with too. Why would I want to continually give my time to someone who I don't like? Why am I not vetting them in the same way that they're vetting me? And why am I auditioning for anyone? Like, it doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense. Yes, of course, you're going to naturally be nervous and you're still going to naturally like want them to like you in a way. But the overall picture in your mind should be, do I like them? It's not a bad thing to want them to like you, but it's a bad thing if it's more important than the fact that you like them, right?
yeah, and I always tell my clients to, like, play this out. So, if you're going from being a pick me to chosen, what comes with being chosen? Are you gonna give up wearing the color red for the next 40 years? Because, like, I mean
What comes with this? Because I don't know if I wanna sign up for this job. Do I have to apply?
yeah, but, it's funny you say that because, like, people do the same thing on job interviews and then wonder how they end up in jobs where they're miserable because
Yep,
they go on the interview and they're like, "Oh, yes, I love working 15 hours a day. Like, I'll be the first person there and the last person to leave, and, like, I'll do all these things for you." And then they get on the job and the their boss is constantly piling up all these tasks, and they're
yep.
like, "I never signed up for this. I didn't." Well, yeah, you did. Like
You signed up for the job, you saw the description. I don't know why you seem so lost now. It's
Right,
like
you said in the interview that, like, you were gonna do all these things. Well, like, that's how dates work too. First, second,
yeah,
third dates, they're interviews.
yeah, you pay attention to what's going on. It's like the trial period, it's as in Germany, they say the Probezeit, it's your probationary period to see if you actually like them. So maybe on day 1, you can still like, the first date, you're just like, "Oh, this is so great." But pay attention. Like, I think so when this guy had asked me, like what I was looking for, like what do I pay attention to? I think it's so crucial to like if you're going to have this first of all, if you have pick me vibes, that you don't make anyone happy, and it also means you have no standard because you're just trying
Right.
to be picked by anybody. If you're a male, please like me. That's not fun. You don't even like girls who do that. Like you don't want if a girl wanted to be my friend and she's like, "Michelle, I just want to be your friend. I just want to be your friend." I would be annoyed because
Yeah.
it's not a real person. It's just like, why would I want to hang out with you? If you want to hang out with me, then act like a normal person, and then we can actually see if we like each other in the same way we were talking about when we met. So I think it's so crucial to have that mindset, first of all, when you're going into dating, and also with like boundaries. Of course, you need to set your boundaries early, but like for the same reason you set boundaries is the same reason you are showing who you are early because you're trying to figure out, okay, is this a good fit? Is this a possibility for something? You don't want to be dating someone for 3 months and then just find out like, that y'all's views are so totally different that you could never you avoid, how do I say it? Sometimes in the beginning you avoid so many conversations that actually need to be had, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't talk about these terrible subjects in the, yeah, okay, yeah, some of them maybe you don't want to talk about because they're not fun. But if it's like a pivotal thing for you, then maybe you should figure that out pretty early. Like, I don't know, for me, if some people voted for certain people, I might not want to date them. And I don't need to go on 4 dates to be like, oh, I guess I'm gonna just not date you now because I still have the same view that I had in the beginning. So it's the same as like present your real self in the beginning, present the things that matter, and it's not bad. You don't have to talk about it if it's not fun, but if it is a deal breaker for you, then be clear on what you're looking for, and that should be your values in all your relationships in your life, not just dating.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can think of like, so, I'm a Black woman who is married to a Latino man. And I never had a racial preference when I was single and dating, which is kind of funny because I always did have preferences within races. Like when I dated white boys, they needed to look a certain way. When I dated,
Yeah,
black
but
men,
not
but
actually racial. I get you.
but having a racial preference in general, I
I
didn't
never
have.
put it that way, but I fully understand.
And I say that because, if you remember years ago, when Trayvon Martin was killed,
Mhm.
I was dating a man who was white, and he said something along the lines of like he got what he deserved.
Oof.
Um, and I was trying to be, I was trying to be like diplomatic, and I was like, okay, can you explain how what you meant by that? Um, can I get a little bit more detail to how you came to this conclusion? That type of thing. And he went on about it, and he said some very problematic things, and I had to be like, okay, you and I are dating. And at the time, he and I were not serious. Like we had not like gone to like being exclusive or anything. But like I tell my clients, I was like, play this out. I was like, well, how would you feel if like we ended up getting married and we had a son, for example? And he was like, well, that would never happen to our son because I would raise him right. And he would like, no, it was just like, oh, okay.
You seem to know a whole lot about a boy who you never met.
And I'm like, if we got together and we had a son,
You'd
like
still be half
when
black.
that's yeah, when son goes out into the world, people are going to see a black man.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of how he was raised, what neighborhood he grew up in. And like there's certain things that come along with that
Mhm.
you seem to be highly ignorant of, and you seem to be not willing to learn about, which is
Yeah.
ignorance I can fix, but the willingness to learn, if you don't have that, like that's a
Vet
problem.
your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it's things like that we have to learn. To this day, I don't think he's a terrible person. I think he's very ignorant, but I don't think he's a terrible person. But I also had to be like, okay, this relationship is not going to work because I listened to that, I heard that, and when I played it out, I was like, that's not going to work for me. There are so many situations in which that is not going to work. Him interacting with my nephews, for example, is not going to
Mhm.
work for me.
Yeah.
And, that's like a pretty big example, but how often do we see it in even the smaller things that, a man has views like, I work with a lot of women who come from faith backgrounds. So they're Christian, they're Hindu, they're Muslim, whatever. And they will date men who will say problematic things about their chosen faith. And it's like, is that really going to work? Like if you say it's one thing to be raised in the faith and kind of be ambivalent about it. But
Yeah.
if you are really into that faith and you're dealing with somebody who has problematic things to say, have you thought about what happens like when you have children? Have you thought about even just like being around your family and having certain religious like celebrations? How are they going to be then? Have you really taken the time to think about these things?
Yeah. We think in the short term when we're thinking about this pick me mentality, but if you don't actually take the time to figure out what you want, well, then you're not going to even have anything to choose from when it does show up. And you're going to have this pick me, I just need someone to like me kind of thing. And in the same way, like being chosen and this pick me thing have the opposite effect. When you think about keeping a man, what does a man need to do to keep a woman? Like, what do you need to do to be kept by a man? Where, what standards are you holding for yourself that you're like, okay, if he does this, this is not okay. This does, I don't stay if he does these things. Where are you lowering all of your standards for a man? But then you're like, oh, but I can keep a man because I've tossed away mine completely, basically.
Yeah, like, first of all, back to what I said earlier, you can't keep someone who doesn't want to be kept.
Mhm. It's
So,
so simple and so true.
I mean, so like this is one of the things that you have to discern from the beginning.
Mhm.
Like if you're serious about wanting to be in a long-term relationship, whether when I say long-term, maybe that is marriage, maybe you're the type you want like what Oprah and Stedman have, you know. But whatever it is, you have to make sure that that person's on the same page as you.
Mhm.
But also once we get there, like yes, I have standards for what it would take for my husband to keep me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You
And
when they're treating you, oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I have no problem letting him know that, but also, like, yes, I do ask, what would it take for my husband to keep me? Because I need to know that. And not in like a pick me, I'll do whatever he wants. I need to know his things on his list of, you know, what Keisha needs to do to be kept. Like, if
Yeah.
there's something on that list that I can't deal with, then I need to like bow out respectfully. It's not
Yeah,
about keeping any man, it's about whether or not both of our standards for being kept fit each other.
exactly. It's basically rephrasing the exact same thing. It's
Yeah.
basically you seeing your standards and, like, these are the deal breaker standards, not the, "Oh, that's nice to have, but, like, I can tolerate that you don't have this." These are the deal breaker standards. If you don't know your deal breaker standards of how you will exist with this person, of course communicating sometimes, most of the time, every time, if they don't know it, because if he could he would, but he has to also know, because if he doesn't know then he can't, but maybe he could. So you should communicate what your standards are and then observe whether that person can meet them or not. And in the same way, you need to know what your standards are, because both people should be wanting to be kept and wanting to keep the other person. It's not a matter of just trying to be kept. Because if I can't meet it in the same way you said, I shouldn't be there. I'm not trying to become an entire new person for this person. There are people who will change themselves. There are habits that people will change. There are people who will quit smoking to go have that partner, but it is not the thing I'm going to write out for them to go do automatically, because I'm like, I'm not here to make you do anything. If you're doing that, you're choosing to do that. In the same way that I only want people who have worked on themselves or want to work on themselves before me. I'm happy to inspire you to work on yourself more, but I don't want to be the reason. Why? Because I don't want to take on that responsibility of something that I would want you to want for yourself first.
Yeah, and it's also I don't want that to be weaponized either.
Yeah.
Um, if I
You made
said
me do this.
yeah,
I didn't make you do anything.
I mean, even when it's not romantic, if I said to you, "Hey, Michelle, as a condition of our friendship, um, you and I are in different time zones, and like I need you to be up at this time, even though it's very inconvenient for you, because I am going to want to call you every day at that time." And you said, "Okay, I can do that. That's fine. I'm willing to do
Mhm.
that." Um, what happens the moment you and I get into an argument and you're pissed at me for something, and I
But
call you at
you
that
made
time?
me get up at this time when I said I don't like getting up early.
Right.
I
Or
did
you
all
just
of this for you. This is where these
yeah,
boundary issues come in. You
or
resent
you
the
just don't
people
do it.
that, yeah.
Yeah. And then that happens and I'm like, "I thought I was very clear. As a condition of our friendship, you need to be up at this time." You know? And you're like, "Well, I'm pissed at you right now, so the rules have changed and I can't do
Yeah,
that."
exactly.
And then you end up in a relationship that's not aligned because it's not something that you weren't aligned with getting up at that time anyways. Like,
Mhm.
it would be different if you were just like, hey, this time that we've been spending together, or I noticed that like you called me that one day and I had to get up early. But like once I did it, like so many things changed. I get so much more done in the day. I'm definitely going to get up at this time. If you
Yeah.
come to that conclusion yourself, then that's great because whether or not I'm around, you can hold to it. And then and then it's lovely that it works out.
Yeah. But I'm not gonna resent you for it if it
Right.
does. It's like, "Oh, yeah, I don't like that timing anymore." So pay attention to the things and communicate, but also know your standards. I think that's something very important and that people don't always think about that deeply is just sit and think about like what are my standards? What are my deal breakers? To be honest, if anything, for me, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, especially as a relationship coach, but for me, I feel like I learn the most when leaving a relationship.
Yeah.
Of course, you learn a lot of the stuff you don't want, but actually, I also like to focus on what I did like too, because I'm like, that was really nice, or like that by far was the best so far. I absolutely have to have that in all relationships going forward.
Yeah. Or even you also learn, I'm trying to say this in a very diplomatic way.
Yeah. We'll have it on the record.
Right. So, a lot of dating coaches give advice about what is and what isn't acceptable in a relationship.
Mhm.
One of the things I can think of is like texting, for example, like, oh no, he should always call you. Well, I've been in relationships where because of my schedule, it was so much better to be with a man who was like texting and sending voice messages than it was him always calling me. But
Yeah.
also, you learn about like when you leave a relationship, you learn about what you can and can't tolerate because the fact is that no one's perfect. And when we're thinking about our standards and our boundaries and our deal breakers, we have to discern between what's a deal breaker and what's mildly annoying. And like also what's annoying to us. Because I can think there are certain things that when I met my husband that he did that I found annoying. Guess what? 6 years later, he still does those things.
Still annoying.
Right. But there are also things that like I can live with too. Whereas, sometimes like you know how it is. I talk with a friend of mine who is married and I will say, yeah, my husband did this and it was really annoying. He's like, oh girl, like if that were me, I couldn't take that. Like I couldn't deal with that at all. I
Yeah.
don't see how you put up with that. So like you should leave him. And if you're not the type of person to be your own person and to be grounded in who you are, then like maybe I would leave a relationship for that reason. But
Mhm.
instead, I think, yeah, last week you told me that your husband did such and such, and like that would like bother me to no end, and yet you managed to stay with this man. Like we have,
Everyone has their different level of tolerances. Like, I have friends who I hear things and I'm like, "Wow, that's so interesting you're still there." Like, I'm not trying to tell them what to do, it's just a matter of, like, we have very different standards on the way we operate. We communicate differently too, like, I'm gonna have a certain way that I'm gonna communicate because I'm a different human than other people. And I also am a mindset coach. So my communication style is very different than some of my friends. And like that's okay. But it's like you said, you tolerate different things and every human is a different has a different perspective, even if you're all experiencing the same situation or event, you're experiencing it in different ways, right? So from different perspectives, your perspectives will never be the same. So making sure that you know what is your deal breaker versus is this annoying versus is this so annoying that one day I could divorce for it.
right. Or I could just blow up at him and like,
Yeah, like
start yelling and screaming. He's like, what? Like, I never knew that this was.
you always chew with your mouth open. And I'm taking to meet my mom. Like you have to stop. These things bug me, but I don't know. I think if it's really that annoying, like if it's really that annoying, you're gonna be annoyed by it enough that you wouldn't get past the dating stages because you'd be
You
like,
shouldn't. But
I
like
can't
I see
tolerate
this happen in relationships that people don't know the difference. So they go to one extreme or the other. Either I can't stay with this person because they're not perfect.
it. Yeah.
Or they say, well, like everyone has their little faults, and so they stay in the relationship, and it's like, but this isn't just a little fault that you're annoyed by. This is something
Yeah.
that like is keeping you up at night that you can't stand, that you can't tolerate. There's a difference between like the little annoyances and things that are deal breakers for you.
Yeah. I mean, even looking at your values, if you don't know your values and your values like really don't line, like you don't have to have all of the same values, but if there are certain things that y'all value that butt heads, for example, I mean, this is really extreme, but I don't know why it's the first thing that came to my mind, but I think there was years ago where on TV it was like a white guy who's in the KKK, but he's married to like a black woman or something like this. And look at this, and you're like, how does that work? Like for me, I don't know. It still doesn't make sense to me. But for me, value wise, they're not aligned
Right.
because
Yeah.
yeah, so when you see this, I just go, okay, if you don't match in values, if the other person disagrees with something so much, like y'all just fundamentally do not agree, then you need to take that into account because later on it is going to come, it's only going to get bigger, especially if it's one of your like main values. It's only going to get bigger and worse over time. So it's like your the guy you were dating when he said this thing about Trayvon Martin. It can start out small, but that's going to be huge when the kid shows up, when you're talking, when you go to meet your dad, when your brother shows up, and they're all like, oh, what do you think about all of them? It's going to all come out.
Right. And like some things like don't come into play like that. So in that example with Trayvon Martin, maybe if he and I, if neither of us wanted children, maybe that wouldn't become as big of a deal. Maybe that
Yeah.
would have been something that I would have put up with. But knowing that I did and thinking about, you know, it's a 50-50 shot, boy or girl, especially. Um,
Yeah.
like, like particularly how he may treat a boy in a case
Mhm.
like that. I was like, okay, that's like I don't like those odds. That is not something that I can be comfortable with. But then that comes to back to that idea of like either being a pick me or allowing yourself to get carried away with what other people say is acceptable and not acceptable in a relationship. It may or may not apply to your situation. And you have to
Mhm.
understand when it does apply and when it doesn't apply.
If you're not focused, you need to be able to pay attention to when, yeah, I don't even know how to say that. Yes. I'm just going to say yes because I've lost my train of thought.
Well, no,
Right.
I think you're going to this idea of like having that type of focus and understanding, because back to my husband doing little things that annoy me.
Mhm.
Um, there are times where like I will talk to him and I will say, Hey, I really think that you should work on this habit because I think professionally, like this would, if you ditch this, you would be able to find better jobs, or this area in your life would improve if you thought about this.
Yeah.
Um, I can say one that applies to both of us. I have a sweet tooth. My husband likes fried foods. We have both talked to each other about like healthier eating, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, like, there's those things where it does, like, there's legitimate concern in talking to each other, and, like, it may make sense to, like, you each talk to each other about, like, improving those habits. But there are some times where it's things like, "This is a me problem, and really no one else, like,
Mhm.
would care about it." So, because it is just a me problem, is it so big of a me problem that I need to leave this relationship? Or
Yeah.
is it so small of a me problem that I need to realize that this is something that's quirky and like really no one else cares? Like,
Yeah. Like, should I even bother saying something because
right.
am I is this here's the mindset coach in me. Is this really the problem or is it something else and I'm calling this the problem? Am I disguising another problem with this very petty small thing? It's like the get divorced over the closet door being open. You
Yeah.
didn't get divorced over the closet door being open. You got divorced because y'all clearly couldn't communicate and somebody kept leaving that closet door open.
Yeah. And that closet door being open was was a symbol of this person being careless for years,
Yeah.
leaving things out, like not picking up after themselves and all that.
Mhm.
And the closet door is the final straw.
Yep. But you didn't say nothing because
Right.
auditioning would never tell someone that they need to do something. Okay, one last point, and then I will let you go. I really love this one. You talked about your college professor. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Your college professor giving the best reason to get married. I'll let you tell the rest so I don't take it from you.
Yeah, so this was a philosophy class I was taking, and
Mhm.
the professor asked everyone, "What's the best reason to get married?" And people threw out all sorts of reasons. Somebody was like, "Well, because the person's rich," and the professor was like, "Well, that works as long as said person still has money. If they lose everything, then that marriage is done." Because both people are really good looking. Looks fade over time. So people kept throwing out all of these reasons, and he was like, no, everyone. The best reason to get married is because both of you are lonely. Two people who are lonely will never leave each other because they don't ever want to be lonely again.
It's so funny because it works.
But like you
It
think
only
about
works in the fact that it only works in the fact that they don't wanna be lonely, but they won't be happy.
right. So, back to this whole topic of like pick me's and being chosen. First of all, it's not just a woman thing. There are male pick me's too. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and you see this like there are many people who give marriage a bad name because of situations like this. Because, yes, I truly know plenty of unhappily married couples.
Mhm.
And it is situations like this. They don't want to be lonely. It's not socially acceptable to be single after a certain age, things like that. And if you want marriage for the sake of marriage, the title, the whatever status you believe that marriage bestows upon you, you can find people and have marriages for that reason. But if
Yeah,
you want marriage for partnership, companionship, being happy, um, you really have to be firm on what your standards and your needs are.
absolutely. It reminds me also of the story you told, when we were on your podcast about, your ex who you asked him if you wanted to get married. He casually was just like, "Yeah, this seems okay. You get along with my family."
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you wanna share that story?
Yeah. So he and I were dating for a while, and at the time, I had a lot of friends who were getting married. So, as women, you start to feel that peer pressure and all of that. People are like, "Oh, when are you going to get married?" So, I brought it up to him and I was like, we were over at his house. He was watching TV, and I just straight out said, "Hey, marriage. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking?" And I thought this was going to be okay, well, like we've been dating this long, let's talk about timelines, like what are your needs and all that. And he barely looked up from the TV. He was like, "Yeah, sure. Like let me know what you think about, like how do you want to be proposed to, what kind of ring you want or whatever." And again, acts of service is my love language. So I can't remember exactly what I was doing at the time, but I was doing something for him, like cleaning or cooking or whatever. And I just, I stopped and was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're saying you want to get married. That's cool. Let me know what it is that you want. Like you have a ring in mind or whatever, just let me know." And you know, I'm thinking at the time, like maybe he just didn't really hear me. And like, we're talking about marriage, like it's a serious thing. How do you feel about it? And that's when he said, he was like, "Look, you and I get along. My family likes you. We don't have any problems. I think you'll be a good mother. I want kids." And he was like, "Both of us work all the time. It's not like we're going to see each other all the time, anyways. So you want to do this marriage thing? Like, it's fine. We're compatible. We're good. Like, let's just do that." And it was at that moment because I always talk about like I'm not like a romantic person, which I plan on doing a video about that, about how like that's not really true. But it was at that moment that I was like, that's what made me realize that marriage was not just like some practical thing for me to do on a certain timeline, which I think is the trap a lot of pick-me's get into.
Mm,
It's like,
yes.
no, I actually want to be in love with the person that I'm marrying. And I want them to feel that way about me too. I don't want to be, oh, she's a good choice on paper, so why not?
Yeah. At that time, were you in love with like, were you both in love with each other at the time, or you just had been dating for a while?
We had been dating for several months at the time, and I had a lot of affection for him.
Mhm. Had you
Like,
said you loved
actually,
each
yeah.
other at that time?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
it yes, I feel like it was mutual. I feel like we genuinely cared about each other. I feel like we could have had a very good partnership,
Yeah.
but it was not, but in love, no, no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very unfortunate. But it does put a lot of perspective into the fact that, for example, I say I'm definitely looking for a partner, but I definitely mean I wanna be in love, romantic partner. I'm not looking to just partner up and be like, "Okay, so let's do the baby thing and live in the same house." Like, if someone told me we won't really see each other, I'd be like, "Yeah, that's just not what I'm looking for." But it is interesting because I know so many people and so many women who would be like, "Yeah, but he wanted to get married. Like, why weren't you happy with that decision? Why it was so easy for him to respond that way. Isn't that what you want?" That I think that's an ultimate difference between a pick me and keeping a man is just being like, actually, this isn't, we're not even on the same page about what this means in the end and
Yeah,
being
I think that was
chosen.
I think that was the
He,
moment I realized I wasn't a pick me.
yeah.
'Cause
You
'cause
you
talking about
technically
playing it out, like I played out that moment. I played out the moment where years down the line, we had kids and we were by all accounts successful, had the house, had the decent jobs, had the kids and all that. And the kids are asking me, "Mommy, like, how did you and daddy know that you two were in love?" And I have to answer with, well, what had happened was we actually weren't.
still not. Actually, we're even less in love than ever, but we get
Right.
along and we work. I take care of y'all. He goes to work. Rotate.
Right. And when I thought about that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. Right.
Yeah. Dang. It's really unfortunate. It's just, yeah, I just can't not think of, like, how many women would really love to be in that situation and have it work like that, but not see it. They wouldn't see it in the same way. They would see it as, "No, this is so much easier than anything else I've experienced."
Yeah. Or unfortunately, marriage is one of those things that's very easy to get into, but very difficult to get out of.
Mm,
So you think about women who get in those situations and then they end up later on bitter, going through a hard divorce,
yeah,
or they stay in the marriage and then they stay in it because they've been staying and they have kids and all that, but constantly wondering what could have been.
yeah. They're giving up themselves, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. This was a great talk after all of the technical difficulties. But I really loved it. Of course, as usual, we will definitely do this again and I will get it right on the first time when it comes to doing this broadcasting. But would you like to tell the viewers where to find you? I'll also link it in the notes here somewhere.
Yeah, so it is very easy because my name is Keshia Rice. Keshia spelled Keshia. But once you get the spelling of my first name correctly, my website's KeshiaRice.com, and I'm at Keshia Rice on YouTube, on Instagram, and on TikTok. So,
Great. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon then. Have a
okay,
wonderful day.
you too. Bye.
Bye.